What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Inside Inter Miami. It's episode 2 of the new 2026 season. I'm your host, Andre Fernandez, joined as always by our Inter Miami beat writer, Michelle Kaufman. We are underway, and it's actually been a game to watch, a sneak preview,
Oh,
you
you
could
could
say.
call it a game. You could
We
call
could
it a
call it a
game, but
game. Not a
yeah.
great game for Inter Miami, but a break the ice, shake off the rust game, hopefully for their sake. We got a sneak preview of the team against Alianza Lima playing in Peru last week. Understandably, the team looked rusty. Like I said, 3-0 defeat. We'll review a little bit of what went on in the game, first impressions. Unfortunately, an apparent knee injury to newly acquired Sergio Reguilon last week, too. We'll hear from Javier Mascherano, who talked right before the game, before the preseason began. We'll have a conversation with Facundo Mura and goalie Rocco Rios Novo, who's back after his future was in question regarding the team. And we'll talk a little bit about the latest roster moves and look ahead to the next preseason game, which is this Saturday in Colombia. But before we get to the Peru game, Michelle, your thoughts so far on this team? What can you really take from a 3-0 defeat in an exhibition where they haven't played for over a month, albeit a very short MLS offseason, but still, this was kind of just like the shake the rust game and play. But what are your thoughts from that first game?
Well, let's see. What can we take? What can we take is they were very rusty. I mean, extremely rusty. The team did not look good. And, you have to really realize that they only practiced for 5 days. They literally had a 6-week break from the whole season of 11 months, which is not too long of a break. And then they reported to camp the previous Saturday and played on Saturday. They traveled Friday. So it means they had 5 days of training, and there were some new players who are literally just joining the team. They were missing some players who were still not there. Tadeo Allende was still not there. He's awaiting his visa. And Mikael, which is a Brazilian center back, he also was missing, awaiting visa papers. So there were, a few players missing, and they did not look, they looked disjointed. They lost 3-0, by the way. Yeah, the score was 3-0. And a 42-year-old player, Paulo Guerrero, who's a legend in Peru, but he is 42 years old. He scored 2 goals in a span of 6 minutes in the first half. That is not a great statement for your defense if a 42-year-old, albeit an excellent player, a legend in Peru, he really is. He's an outstanding player, but he is 42 years old and he scored 2 goals in the span of 6 minutes. So, once again, the whole thing in the offseason that we talked about is that they were going to bolster the defense. Dane St. Clair started his first game for the team, so he's the MLS goalkeeper of the year. And they brought in some new defenders. But at the end of the day, they ended up giving up 3 goals, 2 in the first half. One was on a counterattack, which we've seen before, guy wide open, after a counterattack, right wide open in front of the goals. He scored his second goal that way. So some of the same issues that have plagued the team before resurfaced, and other things that have resurfaced, offensively, they didn't really have too many chances. Lionel Messi had one free kick that he missed that sailed over the bar. And then Luis Suarez started. Luis Suarez started the game along with Silvetti, and he had the one clear chance he did have. Rodrigo de Paul sent him a nice pass. He had a clear chance, and he shanked it over the crossbar. Those were basically their 2 scoring opportunities. So overall, it was not a very good looking game, but they had only practiced for 5 days. And, the thing with this team is that most teams in MLS are not playing 5 days into preseason a game in a foreign country with an international broadcast. By the way, the broadcast was not good.
Bad. Yeah.
I mean, no offense, these guys, it was a crew, it's a group called One Football. You have to stream it and pay $5. They were not very familiar with the team. They were calling the players by numbers. They didn't really know who the players were, didn't know much about them. But
Ooh.
anyway, it was a way to watch the game. It was the only way to watch the game. So it was worth $5. to watch the game. That's how I got to see it. But the truth is, they have a long way to go. Still, they have a lot of work to do. But what I was saying real quick is that the other teams in MLS are not out there on display 5 days into training camp for the whole world to see and critique.
Right.
So in a way, it's a little unfair. Well, it's not unfair. It's their choice to go gallivanting
True.
around South America.
Yeah, no one's forcing them to do that. Right.
No one's forcing. The other teams do things behind closed doors. They're going and gallivanting around South America to make money and to, spread their brand, which is all good and well. But also it means that when you're 5 days into training camp, everyone sees what your team looks like 5 days into training camp. So I don't think there's too much to be taken from that game, except that the defense, still obviously does need some work.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of like, first day of spring training or the, in the NFL, the first preseason game. It's not even the dress rehearsal game that you really game plan for. Like this team for a little while is going to have a lot of new parts, a lot of new players. It's all about meshing, coming together, and it's going to probably take an entire preseason, maybe even a little bit into the regular season. We've seen it before when they add pieces here and there. So yeah, and then on top of that, the factors you're saying, I don't really take much, if at all, of just getting back on the field, getting back in a game setting, and kind of saying, okay, we're back. Let's start putting the pieces together. But other than that, I don't think people need to get too worked up about the score or anything.
No,
like
not
that.
Too worked up. The one thing that is that I would say the most newsworthy takeaway is that Sergio Reguilon got injured in the opening minutes.
That's what you don't want.
That is a concern, and we still don't know, as of the recording of this podcast. The club has not released what is the update, what is his diagnosis. He seemed to have a knee injury, and a knee injury can be serious. Hopefully it's not. This is a young man who really wanted to show himself after he had signed with Real Madrid, but went on loans. He signed with Tottenham, went on loans. He hasn't really been able to get his career going, even though he obviously has a pedigree that these big clubs signed him. He obviously has potential, and he hasn't played in a long time. He was let go, in May. So from Tottenham, he was cut loose. So he has not played at all since May. This was his first competitive game since May, and we're in January. And in the opening minutes, he went down with what looked like a knee injury. So that is the only real newsworthy takeaway, is that we're waiting to hear if that knee injury was minor or major. I hope for him and, for the team that it's a minor injury, not a major injury, because he's a left back and he was signed to replace Jordi Alba. So he's a key player. They had big plans for him, and we really don't know as of right now what his situation is.
Yeah, that's the thing you don't want to happen in these games, especially, is to get off and one of your big acquisitions already be in a situation where you could miss some time. We don't know yet, like you said, but hopefully it's not, for their sake, hopefully not like a serious long-term thing with him. Let's hear from Javier Mascherano, who spoke at his first preseason press conference earlier last week.
Bueno, claramente tenemos la ilusión de hacer una muy buena temporada como fue la temporada pasada, y claramente vamos a ir no solamente por tratar de conseguir y revalidar el título de la MLS, sino también ir por las competiciones que nos quedaron ahí o nos quedamos en la puerta, ¿no? Como fue con la Champions, como fue la League Cup. La verdad que es una temporada de muchos retos y con la responsabilidad que exige este club de competir partido tras partido.
¿Cómo estás viendo al equipo en estos primeros entrenamientos? Háblanos un poco de la preparación de los jugadores.
No, primero muy contento por cómo han vuelto los jugadores. Se nota que más allá del descanso necesario que han tenido, se han cuidado y eso nos ha permitido ir acelerando en la preparación. Siempre es importante que los jugadores lleguen en buenas condiciones para poder acelerar en algunos plazos, así que contento, estamos trabajando bien. Es muy típico de esta liga tener que ir rearmando equipos temporada tras temporada. claramente se nos han ido jugadores importantes, jugadores que han marcado un poco y han dejado huella en este club, como Jordi, como Busi, y bueno, trataremos de reemplazarlo de la mejor manera.
¿Cómo afrontáis este Champions Tour por Sudamérica, los partidos en Perú, en Colombia, en Ecuador, en países tan futboleros como estos?
Bueno, primero que creo que es muy importante para el club poder seguir tratando sobre todo de agrandar la marca de club. Ya nos tocó el año pasado hacer un tour muy parecido y el cariño hacia los jugadores, sobre todo obviamente tener a Leo en el equipo lo hace todo mucho más especial y siempre es lindo tener el contacto porque bueno, sabemos que Sudamérica es un continente muy cálido, muy futbolero, así que también desde el plano deportivo nos sirve mucho jugar contra equipos competitivos, equipos que normalmente juegan Copa Libertadores, que están en un muy buen nivel, así que nos sirve mucho de preparación.
Y la última, Mache, ahora hablabas de los grandes retos que esperan esta temporada, ¿no? Pero ¿qué supone llevar la estrella en el pecho esta temporada? ¿Y qué mensaje le mandarías a los fans de Inter?
Bueno, un poco lo que dije en la primera respuesta, ¿no? La responsabilidad de tratar de revalidar. Si hay algo que este equipo y este club te exige es no quedarte con lo conseguido, sino ir por más. Y eso es lo que vamos a tratar de transmitirle a los jugadores este año, ¿no? Bueno, que fue algo muy importante, la primera en el club, eso ya quedará para siempre, pero que no nos vamos a quedar en los logros del pasado, sino tratar de seguir agrandando el palmarés del club.
Okay, so that's kind of sort of Javier Mascherano's season opening statement, which to translate is he said, you know, we are a club that wants to aspire to more. We talked last week about mass. He said, we don't want to just defend our title. We don't want to just defend our title. He said, we don't want to rest on our laurels. That was a wonderful achievement. It was the first one, the first title for this club, MLS title. And that will always be there for the history, but we want more. We want to win the tournaments that we were not able to win last year, the ones that we got close to winning. So we have more goals. We want to win more. He said that he was pleased with the condition that the players arrived in. He said that it's always important when you're starting preseason for the players to come in good shape because that helps accelerate the preparation. And he said that he felt that the players did come in good shape and that would help accelerate their training going into the preseason. He said they obviously in this league, because of the way that the rosters are structured, there's a lot of rebuilding year after year after year, which by the way, he said in another interview that we had with him last week, that he thinks it's real important that the signings that Inter Miami made in this offseason, they did a lot of long-term deals, long-term contracts through 28, through 29, even through 2030. And he said that that's important because they can have some continuity. And he felt that, you know, MLS is a league where if you have to keep changing 11 or 12 players every year, it's very difficult to keep something going. So anyway, he said here again that it's hard when you have to rebuild year after year and that they lost two important players, Jordi and Busi, who left their mark on this team, but now they're going to rebuild. As far as the tour in South America, because they went to Peru, they're going to Colombia, Ecuador, and they added Puerto Rico. They're going to Puerto Rico also. So in the Caribbean, he said that it helps to grow the brand and that, you know, there's so much affection from the fans in that region of the world, especially with Messi on the team. And it's nice. It's a good way for them to test themselves in front of passionate fans and against teams that are very competitive, that play, for example, in Copa Libertadores, which is a big competitive tournament. So it's a good way for them to prepare for the season.
Yeah, and that's what this is all about right now. Just preparing, like we said, getting everything together, gelling with the new players. Obviously, you lose two legends like that. You know, I mean, let's be honest. That's not, you know, you don't replace those guys that easily. But they're starting to get reps in there as well. The new acquisitions. And speaking of new acquisitions, Dane St. Clair. I mean, I know we talked about it. He comes in. expected to be the starter. Granted, again, this is this setting that we've just talked about at length. But what did you think about just overall him at least getting in there, breaking the ice, and the whole situation with him and Rocco Rios Nova, who was so good down the stretch? Now, presumably, they're going to split sometime, but Dane St. Clair obviously didn't come here to ride the bench. He's going to probably be the main goalie out of the two.
Yeah, and then we'll just sort of review the goalkeeper situation. A year ago, Oscar Ustari was the starter. He was Messi's friend. He was the veteran. They signed him to a new contract, a 2-year deal where he was making $800,000. So, we had Drake Callender had just gotten injured in training camp a year ago with the U.S. national team. Remember, he was the starter for a long time, for 3 years. And then Ustari came in as the starter when Drake got injured. And Ustari was the starter all season up until just before the playoffs. They had a bad game against Chicago, and Mascherano decided with his staff, with the coaching staff, to make a change at goalkeeper. Everyone thought it was a risky move at that point in the season, right before the playoffs, to bring in a new keeper, especially Rocco Rios Novo, a guy who had very little experience and didn't play that much over the year. But he came in and really did a good job. He held his own. He did a good job, led them all the way to the championship. So you would think, okay, they're not going to make a change at goalkeeper, right? Because they just won the world. They didn't win the World Cup. They won the MLS Cup. But Rios Novo was on loan from Lanús, from a team in Argentina. So at the end of the season, from what I heard, Lanús and Inter Miami were having some trouble coming to a proper price to get him to come back. And so they also decided to go for the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year, which makes sense. Dane St. Clair was a free agent, and they said, let's go get the best keeper in MLS. The best keeper in MLS is very familiar with all the MLS teams, the MLS players. He's played against all of these teams for 7 years with Minnesota United. So you're getting a goalkeeper who is on the Canadian national team, is potentially going to start in the World Cup coming up. This is a world-class level keeper who also has 7 years of experience in MLS. So he knows all the teams. And if there are PKs, he knows the players he's going up against for the most part. So that was a really, really big signing for them to get Dane St. Clair. And then the thought was, well, I guess Rocco's not going to come back because he would have to come back as a backup after being the starter. Well, guess what? He decided he is coming back. They were able to work out a deal, and he is back presumably as number 2 for the reasons that we just said. But you do have 2 very strong keepers. Now, what happened to Ustari in all of this? Ustari and Inter Miami mutually decided, or so it's announced, mutually decided to end his contract. So he had another year to go on his contract. They came to some kind of agreement. He is gone. So Oscar Ustari is no longer on the team. So now they have Dane St. Clair. They have Rocco Rios Novo, whom we know is a very good backup keeper and is capable of starting and leading a team to an MLS Cup. So you've got 2 very strong keepers. And then they added a third, Luis Barraza, who was with DC United last year. So he's of Mexican descent, grew up in New Mexico, but he also has MLS experience. So he's the third keeper. So the goalkeeper position is definitely something to watch because we've got Dane St. Clair. He made a good save, by the way, against Peru with his feet. He had really good instincts. Unfortunately for him, he deflected it with his foot, and the rebound basically went to Guerrero, who then scored on a header. So he scored on the rebound. But the 3 goals were not really Dane St. Clair's fault. Dane St. Clair is obviously a very good world-class World Cup level keeper. And then they've got Rocco is back. And Rocco is a really good locker room guy too. He's a very friendly guy to the other players. He's friendly to the media. I have to say he's a nice person. So I think they were happy to get him back. And I think we're going to hear from him.
Bueno, renovar con el equipo, obviamente, mucha felicidad, quería estar acá, quiero seguir haciendo historia en este club y luchar por más títulos. Bueno, nos estamos preparando bien, obviamente muy emocionados por arrancar, por empezar a jugar, a competir de vuelta. Son grandes equipos de Sudamérica, así que es un gran desafío para nosotros y en preparación para lo que viene. No, la verdad estoy muy ilusionado personalmente por estar ahí en el Miami Freedom Park con toda la gente, con toda la afición apoyándonos. Se me vienen muy buenas sensaciones a la cabeza, con ilusión y con ganas de estar ahí ya. Bueno, esta temporada 2026, un sueño que quizás nos queda pendiente es ganar la CONCACAF. Vamos a pelear por eso. Obviamente tenemos otras competiciones también. Ese yo creo que es el objetivo principal, pero sabemos que estamos en un equipo que está siempre al alto nivel, compitiendo de la mejor forma. Entonces vamos a prepararnos de la mejor manera para competir en cada torneo en el que estemos y salir victoriosos.
All right, so Rocco says that he's very, very happy to be back. He wants to keep making history. He wanted to come back and be part of this team. You know, the truth is he could have gone and started somewhere else. He could have gone somewhere else, I'm sure, and gotten a more guaranteed starting position. But he said he wanted to come back. He wanted to keep making history with this club. He's excited. And he said the rest of the team is also excited to get started, to get things going. With this tour, they're playing some big teams from South America, and that's very, very good for preparation for them. He talked about dreaming of they're going to be playing in Miami Freedom Park this year, the new stadium, which is going up and will open on April 4th against Austin. That's when their first game of the state in that stadium. He said he's excited and dreaming about what it's going to feel like to play in that stadium, and that the main objective right now for this team is to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And Jorge Mas said that at the end of the season last year, when they were playing for the MLS Cup, he said their next goal is to win CONCACAF Champions Cup. That is one that got away from them. That, you know, they really want to show that they are not just capable of winning an MLS Cup against MLS competition. They want, Jorge Mas has said over and over, as we always say, he talks big and he thinks big and he dreams big. He keeps saying that he wants Inter Miami not just to be the best team in MLS, he wants Inter Miami to be a contender in international tournaments like the CONCACAF Champions Cup, against teams from Mexico, against teams from other regions. And that's really the goal, is not just to be the best team in this league, but he wants Inter Miami to be a global team that can compete with some of the other teams in the other countries. So Rocco said that is their main objective right now, is to win CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah, that he wants them to be a global brand, and not just because Lionel Messi is on the team, but also,
exactly.
You know, there's always a handful of recognizable teams, whether they're from Europe, from Mexico, that you'll say the name and people will be like, "Oh yeah, I know them." Inter Miami, he wants Inter Miami in that grouping, in that level of recognition. And like you said, yeah, I mean, you win the MLS, good. Okay, you're the best in America, you're best here in MLS. But now to get that championship, either in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, you know, if one day they play in Libertadores, like he says he wants them to get to that point at some point, those are the ones that'll put you on that more international level as an even more recognizable team. And it'll be interesting to see if they can maintain it beyond Messi in a couple of years, if they can keep acquiring players like they have right now. And that's where those long-term contracts come into play, where that you were mentioning before, how they got a lot of guys now, a lot of key players signed through 2030 and whatnot.
Yeah, I think they want to be. I think he wants to be like, you know, in Argentina. Argentina has a good league. MLS has a good league, you know, but everyone knows Boca Juniors and River Plate. Like everyone knows that those are, you know, the two big teams. Or, you know, in Brazil, everyone knows Palmeiras, and everyone knows, you know, there are certain teams
like
Mexico,
and Bayern and all these teams that people know around the world, like just the drop of a hat. Oh yeah, that team.
Brand. Yeah, that team. So they win their league. They're the best in their league, but they also win intercontinental competitions. That is what he wants Inter Miami to be. Right now, MLS still doesn't have a team that consistently beats the Mexican clubs. Vancouver did a good job this past year, you know, but they haven't had a team that consistently is a contender in international competitions. And so that's what Jorge Mas and David Beckham, the leadership of this team, of this club, wants Inter Miami to be that brand. And like you said, not just because right now everyone knows that pink shirt because Messi's here. Before Messi got here, Inter Miami was David Beckham's team. So it did actually have more, it was a higher profile team than the others in MLS, than a lot of others, because of David Beckham, the David Beckham factor, that he was the owner. So people know, oh, that's David Beckham's team. But they didn't know much about the team, and the team was not winning anything back then. It was just David Beckham's team, and they have a cool pink shirt, but no one, they were not winning.
It was kind of like,
now they want to win.
Yeah, it's kind of like telling me, like, it was kind of like David Beck. It's David Beckham's pet project. It's his team out there in America type of thing. But now it's like they can stand on their own 2 feet and not be just that, you know?
Right. And they did well in the Club World Cup. I think that was really big for this club to get to the knockout stage of the Club World Cup. They were the only MLS team that did. So that was already one small step, or big step, medium-sized step, for this team that a lot of people didn't even feel belonged in the Club World Cup. If you recall, there was a lot of debate. Basically, Gianni Infantino put them in there because they wanted Messi in this tournament. Let's be honest. They wanted Inter Miami in this tournament. So they got in, even though they had not won the MLS Cup. So they got into the tournament and proved that they belonged, and they did well enough to make the knockout stage. So I think that that was a big step in what Jorge Mas is aiming for. And their big aim now is to do well in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which kicks off. They get to start in the round of 16 in May, and they're going to face either Nashville or Ottawa. Nashville plays Ottawa, and then they'll play one of those two teams in March.
Yeah. Well, speaking of veterans, the one that stayed, Luis Suarez. How did he look, Michelle, in that game?
Well, he looked like Luis Suarez toward the end of the season. I have to say, again, I know he's super passionate. Once again, we don't want to read. I personally am not going to be too critical of anybody on the team because they had been practicing for 5 days. I repeat, they had been off for 6 weeks, practicing for 5 days. But I do know that Luis Suarez, he got to start, which I'm sure he was happy about. He got to walk out there with his buddies, with Leo Messi and with Rodrigo de Paul. You know, the three amigos walked out together onto the field. And I know that I'm sure, was excited to finally be back in the starting lineup after not starting in the playoffs. And he did have a golden opportunity. I'm not saying that I would have scored. I know it's hard to score. It's much harder than it looks on TV. But he did have a golden opportunity. Rodrigo de Paul gave him a nice ball, served him a beautiful pass on a silver platter, and he kicked it over the crossbar. So, that is one of those moments where the people who are critics of Luis Suarez and say that he's lost his touch, they're watching that and saying, see, this is why he shouldn't have come back. This is exactly what he was doing. He doesn't belong out there, whatever. I think it's too early to judge him. By the way, before the game, not after the game, we didn't get any chance to talk to Mascherano or pretty much anybody after the game, but of the players who started. But before the game, Javier Mascherano was asked about what is Luis Suarez's role going to be, because he came back. A lot of people didn't know if he was going to come back, and he did come back for one more year. He signed a 1-year deal, and he was asked what is his role going to be. And Javier Mascherano said, everyone starts from ground zero. Everyone starts from zero when you're starting training camp. It's a competition. Luis is going to compete like everybody else for a position, just like everyone. Everyone is starting from zero. The people who started last year don't automatically start this year. Everyone is starting from zero, he said. And he said Luis Suarez is still a legendary player who's a big part of this club. He's an important part of the team. He's an important part of the club. And they still view him that way. Even though he was benched during the playoffs, they still view him as an important part of the club. And he will compete for a position just like everybody else.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he fits in on the field. The off the field, his veteran presence is valuable, but can he be a valuable component still for this new look Inter Miami and not just be there for sentimental reasons or anything like that. We'll see as we get more and more.
Yeah, because really, the reason that the offense looked so good without him, I mean, it did look like a different team. Everyone said it. Even the opponents said this was a different team with Silvetti starting there with Allende, Messi, Silvetti. That trio attacking looked very different because Silvetti and Allende can do things that Suarez, it's not in his game. His game is very different. His game is based on possession and getting the ball in front of the goal and, a lot of possession and the idea of being able to outrace defenders to get behind the defense. That is what they were able to do with Allende and with Silvetti. That is more difficult with Luis Suarez. Even though he is super passionate, he's going to try his best and he's going to do everything he can. But his game is different. He just turned 39. By the way, it was his birthday. So it's a little sad. It would have been nice for him on his birthday, on his 39th birthday, when he got to start in the game finally, if he would have gotten to score a goal, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, well, there'll be other chances. It wasn't meant to be on his birthday, but let's talk a little bit about Tadeo Allende. Signed a permanent contract with Inter Miami. It was huge. We know what kind of run he had, 9 playoff goals. And the team, Michelle, is still pursuing Monterrey forward Germán Bertarame. Got that one right. I know. It's
Yes.
with the name. Native of Argentina, plays for the Mexican national team. Scored the lone goal for Mexico over the weekend in a game against Bolivia. Inter Miami has offered a transfer fee reportedly in the $15 million range. They need to find what's the latest on that?
The latest on that is that everyone thinks it's going to happen. Jorge Mas, Jorge Mas confirmed to the media last week that they did put in an offer. They did put in an offer for Berterame. I got it right. For Berterame, that he is a very important player. He's a good player. He has proven himself with Monterrey. He also has Argentine roots, which that Argentine passport, that is something
On the
important
resume.
for this club. But he does play on the Mexican national team. He has naturalized papers in Mexico from playing there, and he is on the Mexican national team. He could very well play in the World Cup for Mexico. So we're talking about a very high-level player who would be a designated player. They right now have 2 designated players, Lionel Messi and Rodrigo de Paul are the 2 DPs. There's 1 DP spot open. Tadeo Allende is not getting that spot. So that spot is open, and it would be for Berterame. The transfer fee is believed to be in the $15 million range. I even saw a figure as high as $17 million. I don't know. All the Mexican papers are reporting these numbers. But $15 million is a big fee. He was with Atletico Madrid is also part of this deal, which is interesting because Miami has a relationship with Atletico Madrid. They got Rodrigo de Paul, and Berterame also has a background with that club. So there's some money exchange that will go on between Inter Miami, Monterrey, and Atletico Madrid. But anyway, the feeling is from the sources that it is going to happen. The last I heard is that Monterrey wants to make sure that they have a replacement in lined up to replace him before they let him go. So I think they are working on trying to find out who would replace him and working on a replacement for him. And if they get a replacement that they're satisfied with, they will cut him loose and he will come to Miami. He was asked upon return when he came back to Mexico from playing with the Mexican national team about a couple of days ago. Some reporters went up and, accosted him and asked him, what's going on with Miami? What's going on with Miami? And he said, right now I'm going to spend a few days with my family and then we'll see what happens. So he didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He said, well, we'll see what happens. I think maybe by the next recording of this podcast, we will have an answer to this mystery.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably getting close. That's always the classic answer of, yeah, okay. All right. So Otto Aviles, though, going the other way, loaned to Montreal for this season. Not completely unexpected, though.
Not unexpected. I mean, Toto, he had a propensity for getting yellow cards. He was the league leader the previous year in yellow cards. This past year, he worked on that. He didn't have as many, but he still was a player who he got replaced in the starting lineup with Maxi Falcone. Noah Allen outplayed him at times as well. So, you know, in the game the other day, the starting back four were Ian Frey, Maxi Falcone, Noah Allen, and Reguilon. That was the back four. Now, Mikael, the Brazilian player, is coming in as a center back. So he would join and also compete for one of those two center back positions. And, you know, I think that, and they still have Gonzalo Lujan. So I think that Toto was not going to get the minutes. He wasn't going to get enough minutes. There was a chance for him to go on loan to a club. He's a talented player. He's young. He came as an under 21. He's a young player. Miami had to get rid of a under 21 player, by the way, because Ayala is an under 21 initiative player. And again, the MLS rules are so convoluted, but you can only have so many players that arrive here in the under 21 initiative because that's U21 initiative. It's not their age. It's that they are high priced under 21 players that don't count as much against the salary cap budget. So they already had too many in those slots. They needed to get rid of one because they brought in another one. So this is a perfect setup. Toto gets to go play more minutes in Montreal. They said that they're excited for him. They think he's going to fit in well with their system. In the meantime, Miami got rid of one U21 to bring in the other U21, Ayala, who's a defensive midfielder. And I think it's probably a deal that's going to work better for everybody.
Yeah. Among the new defenders, though, is Argentine Facundo Mura. He had to step in for Reguilon when he went down with that injury we talked about earlier. He's primarily a right back, but he could play on the left, and play in the center, even the midfield. Versatility he brings to this team. Facundo Mura is a good acquisition, I think, in terms of depth, in terms of versatility, like we talked about. So far, like, what do you think, Michelle? I know we're going to play a video of his in a minute, but this is a good pickup, I think, for that depth part we were talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a good pickup. I mean, he's primarily a right back, and so he replaces Cello Wygant
Right.
left, and so he replaces Cello, one Argentine for another Argentine. But he's a youngish Argentine right back, but he's also versatile, so he will compete with Ian Frey for the starting position on the right side. However, he is versatile. And he talked, when we interviewed him last week, one of the things he talked about was his versatility, that he has played on the right. He can play in the center. He can even play defensive midfield if needed. He thinks that his versatility is one of his strong suits. And guess what? He was tested right away, because when Reguilon had to leave the game with the knee injury, Facundo was able to go in. And he went in and played almost the whole game on the left side. So he is a guy who can play on both sides. He is from Argentina, so he's familiar with some of the players already on the team. He's familiar with the Argentine style of play, which, you know, Javier Mascherano is from Argentina. The whole staff is from Argentina. A lot of the players are from Argentina. He talked about, it being a dream to play, obviously, with Lionel Messi and the other players on this team. So I think that he is a good, talented, young Argentine right back who is going to fill in for Wygant. He is the Wygant replacement, basically. So, and we got a chance to speak with him. He did a couple interviews. This is what he said about joining Inter Miami.
Bueno, estos primeros días, la verdad que viene todo muy bien. Me recibieron de la mejor manera, tanto la gente del club como mis compañeros, el cuerpo técnico. Así que estoy muy feliz de llegar acá y obviamente esperando que ya empiecen los amistosos de pretemporada.
¿Qué significa para ti este primer desafío profesional y vital fuera de Argentina, de tu país?
No, bueno, un desafío muy importante. Es la primera vez que me toca salir del país y bueno, tengo el privilegio de poder ser parte del Inter Miami, que bueno, se sabe que es un club que tiene un proyecto muy, muy ambicioso y un equipo que viene de salir campeón, con lo cual unirme al equipo y seguir con esa misma expectativa.
Estáis ahora con 3 partidos de pretemporada, en Perú, en Colombia, en Ecuador. ¿Hace ilusión jugar estos partidos en Sudamérica?
Sí, claro, los partidos con países sudamericanos son muy competitivos. he conocido los países, me ha tocado ir a jugar allá, tanto por Copa Libertadores o Copa Sudamericana, y son partidos competitivos que van a servir muy bien como amistosos de cara a la temporada que se viene.
Okay, so he said he's very happy to be here. He feels that he got a very warm welcome from everybody, from all his teammates. They made him blend in, and he felt very welcome. It's his first time playing outside the country. He said it's his first time playing outside of Argentina, so this is going to be a good experience for him. He's really looking forward to his first experience being abroad, being away from his home country. He wanted to come here because it's a very ambitious club. They're coming off the championship. By the way, I will throw in here that when we interviewed him last week, one of the things he told us, the reporters, is that he actually came close to coming here 2 years ago, that the club had reached out to him 2 years ago, and he was in conversation with the club about coming back then, but it didn't work out. The deal did not work out, but he has sort of had his eye on Inter Miami, and they've had their eye on him for the past 2 years. So this was not a new conversation. This has been sort of an ongoing conversation for 2 years, and it finally worked out. He said as far as playing against South American clubs in the preseason, he's very familiar with these clubs, having played against them in Copa Libertadores, in Copa Sudamérica, and Copa Sudamericana. So he said that these are good competitive clubs, and it's a great way to start the preseason. And I believe that is true. Like I said before, I think it is good that they're playing against strong South American teams. They're playing against Atlético Nacional next, in Colombia. These are good clubs. It's good competition for them. It's just that they are on display for the whole world to see on the $5 One Football bad broadcast. But you do get to see the team.
I was gonna say the ones that can't get the names right, like just like a high school. I watch high school football broadcasts that don't go by numbers. I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it sounds. I mean, I've seen there were a lot of comments, and I've gotten some texts and some emails from people saying, "What was that broadcast?" And it's just, I think this, they're broadcasters that they're not familiar with the teams, and they're just told, okay, here, tomorrow you're going to go broadcast Inter Miami against Atlético Nacional, and they have to do their homework really quick. But when they're watching the game, they don't know by sight who all the players are, and they don't know all the backstories, and they don't know all the history. Like they said, one of the announcers said, "Oh, there's Luis Suarez. He's a Uruguayan legend." They did know that, obviously, he's a legend. And he said, last year he was injured. He injured his knee last year, and therefore he didn't get to play very much or whatever. But didn't get to. He was affected by his knee injury, and I'm like, no, he didn't have a knee injury. That's not what happened last year. But anyway, the main thing is you get to watch the video. You get to see the game, which that is the only way to see the game is through that streaming service.
Google AI led them astray with the Suarez injury, probably when they were Googling it on the fly in the 35th minute of the match, probably from the box.
Exactly, that could be it. AI, I'm going to tell you, do not rely on AI. My husband happens to be an author, and he did an AI. He just looked himself up on AI, and it said that he died. It said he died in the year 2000, whatever, and it had a cause of death and everything. Right, and it's because there's another writer or someone else that's somewhat famous who has that same name who did die, but it's not him. But, and then, I mean, so do not, please don't. AI is good for some things, but you can use it as a starting point, but then you need to double check, because AI is artificial intelligence for a reason. It's not real intelligence. It's a starting point. AI
Skynet killing DB. What the hell's going on? All right, back on point. To wrap this episode up, like you mentioned before, the next match in Colombia, then they have a match in Ecuador, then they have a match in Puerto Rico, and like you said, it's the double-edged sword of they're rusty, they're trying to fit parts together right now, but at the same time, they're playing much better opposition than a typical MLS team would be at this stage of the game. So what do you expect, I guess, from the next couple of matches, Michelle, as we build up to that big showdown with Son and LAFC in the LA Coliseum on February 21st?
Yeah, less than a month. I mean, the MLS season is less than a month away. The big kickoff game against LAFC, a highly anticipated opening game. And, I think these games in South America and in Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rico game is against an Ecuadorian team. It's not against a Puerto Rican team, but it's in Puerto Rico. And I think these games are good. Last year we thought going into this same part of the season, we said, are they going to be too tired at the end of the year? And even Javier Mascherano said during the playoffs, I have to admit, he said, then I was concerned that the season was so long and that we played so many games. Remember that they played like 60 games or whatever. He said, I was really worried that we played so many games and did so much travel in the preseason that we were going to lose our legs by the end. And that didn't end up happening. The team actually played its best at the end. And that is the goal in any league, and especially in MLS, where, like we've said a million times, that supporter shield really does not matter. What matters is the playoffs in MLS. You want to play your best at the end during the playoffs. You want to reach your peak. So they did reach their peak at the end of the season last year, despite having played in several South American countries. They played in 5 countries last year during the preseason total. So this year they're going to play in 4 countries. But I think it is good for them. I think that they're getting really competitive games against international, very talented international teams, international players in front of big crowds. And they are excited to see Messi and all that stuff. So they're getting used to all that. The players who are new on the team, these guys that they have signed from the offseason, they're getting their first experience playing on this team with the kind of spotlight that's on them. And if you recall, Dane St. Clair last week said in the podcast, we had a video with him, and he said one of the main reasons he came to Inter Miami is he wanted to test himself in a high profile club under the glare of an international spotlight, because he thinks that'll help him in preparation for the Canadian national team for the World Cup as well. So he got thrown in already. Day 1, game 1, 5 games, 5 days into the preseason. Dane St. Clair is starting in Peru. They're driving through the streets of Peru on a bus, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people on the sides of the road taking pictures of the team bus. That was not happening when he was with Minnesota United. Okay. That was not happening in the preseason with Minnesota United. So now he's on Inter Miami. He's, in a high profile club, in high profile preseason games. And I do think that in the long term, it probably will help them, even if these games look ugly right now.
Yeah, I think all of that is going to pay them off in the long run. That's why you can't get too caught up in a 3-0 loss in a game that might as well be the first, like I said before, like the first spring training game that means nothing in that sense. And it means more just in them getting accustomed to each other and getting everything in place little by little as we got on that road. But LA Coliseum, like you said, less than a month. Can't wait. It's going to be star power out there right out of the chute for both sides.
No, all the movie stars will be there because it's LA. Everyone's going to be there to watch.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun atmosphere to kick off the season, the 2026 MLS season. And we'll be following it and leading you on that road to the opener. Michelle, check out all her work, in the preseason, leading up to it, talking about it, and then beyond. Obviously, we'll have it all covered here and there and here on Inside Inter Miami. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you for watching us, as always, on YouTube or at MiamiHerald.com. For Michelle Kaufman, I'm Andre Fernandez. We'll see you next week.